Millionaire. Agreed to marry. A plain woman for family duty. He froze when the veil fell. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The heavy rain had just begun over Manhattan when Ethan Brooks stood by the wide glass window of his penthouse office, staring at the city lights below. He was 34, the youngest CEO in the Brooks family, a man raised on discipline, strategy, and the endless pursuit of control. Yet at that moment, control was the one thing slipping away from him. His father's will had been read that morning. The words still echoed in his mind. In order to retain his position as CEO, Ethan must be legally married within 30 days. It was absurd, outdated, but in a family where tradition was law, even a billionaire could not refuse. He pressed his hand against the cold window pane and exhaled. Marriage was never part of his plans. Love had always seemed like a liability, a messy variable in a clean equation. But the board was already circling, waiting for his failure. If he did not marry, he would lose everything his father had built. The door opened behind him. His mother, elegant and sharp in her 60s, entered with a quiet authority that filled the room. "Ethan," she said softly, "there is a solution." He turned. "Mother, please do not say what I think you are about to say." She smiled faintly. "There is a girl, a family friend's niece, plain, polite, unassuming, the kind of woman who will not embarrass this family. You need a wife, not a romance." And Ethan's jaw tightened. "A marriage for show. A contract," she corrected, placing a folder on his desk. 6 months. You help her, she helps you. It will keep the inheritance secure until the board's next vote. After that, you can walk away." He looked down at the folder. Inside was a photograph, a young woman with calm eyes, no makeup, her hair tied simply behind her head. Clara Hayes, 28 years old, librarian at a community center on the city's east side. "She is ordinary," he murmured. "Exactly," his mother said. "Ordinary is safe." Ethan closed the folder slowly. The rain outside grew heavier, streaking down the glass like melted silver. He did not believe in fate, but he did believe in survival. "Fine," he said quietly. "Arrange the meeting." The next day, Clara sat across from him in a private booth of an upscale restaurant that looked nothing like her world. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Her thrift store dress was damp from the rain. Her shoes squeaked on the marble floor. She looked nervous but unflinching. "I will be honest with you," Ethan began, his tone clipped. "This is not about love. It is about an arrangement that benefits us both. You will be compensated. You will live comfortably. All I need is your signature and your silence." Clara's gaze lifted, steady and calm. "And what do you get out of it, Mr. Brooks?" "Security," he said. "Family duty." For a moment, she studied him, this man whose watch alone could fund her library for a decade. Then she nodded once. "All right, but I have a condition too." His eyebrow rose. "A condition?" "I will sign your contract," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "If part of that payment goes to save the children's library I work for, it is about to close. I do not care about mansions or titles. I only care about that place." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her directness. Most people negotiated for more money, not for a building full of old books. "You are serious?" he asked. "I am," she said. "So, Mr. Brooks, do we have a deal?" He hesitated only a moment before extending his hand. Her palm was small and cold against his. "Deal," he said. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline as the rain blurred the city lights. Neither of them knew that this deal, this calculated, emotionless decision, was about to change everything. Because on their wedding day, when the veil would fall, Ethan Brooks would realize that nothing about Clara Hayes was ordinary at all. The morning of the wedding came sooner than anyone expected. The Brooks estate was alive with quiet movement, florists arranging white lilies, caterers setting silver trays in perfect symmetry, photographers whispering to assistants about lighting angles. Everything was precise, planned, expensive, everything except the bride. Clara Hayes stood alone in a small dressing room at the far end of the hall. The silk gown that had been delivered 2 days earlier hung loosely on her frame, a clear sign that she was not chosen for glamour. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned the delicate veil into her hair. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked composed, but her heart was restless. She whispered to herself, "It is just 6 months. Save the library, then go home." Ugh. A soft knock sounded. Ethan's assistant, Mr. Howard, stepped inside with a clipboard in hand. "Miss Hayes, the ceremony will begin in 10 minutes. Clara nodded. "Thank you." When the door closed, she took a deep breath, pressing her palms together. Somewhere inside the mansion, Ethan Brooks was preparing as well, adjusting his cufflinks with mechanical precision. He wore a tailored black suit, the kind of elegance that drew respect and distance at once. To him, this was not a wedding, it was a transaction that happened to require flowers and witnesses. In the mirror of his room, he saw his reflection and wondered how his father would have viewed this day. A son marrying for duty, not love, a heart hidden behind contracts and conditions. At the chapel set within the estate gardens, guests began to take their seats. The Brooks family occupied the front rows, every face polite but watchful. Among them, Ethan's cousin Victoria sat with a thin smile, her eyes gleaming with curiosity and calculation. The music began soft strings carrying through the air. Clara stepped out, escorted by an usher she barely knew. Her footsteps echoed across the marble floor. When she reached the altar, she dared to glance at Ethan. His eyes met hers briefly, unreadable, like glass over deep water. The vows were short and cold. There were no declarations of love, only the quiet murmur of legality. When the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride," Ethan hesitated, then simply bowed his head in formal acknowledgement. Cameras clicked, guests clapped, and just like that, they were husband and wife. That evening, as the last of the guests departed, the new Mrs. Brooks stood on the grand balcony overlooking the city lights. The view stretched endlessly, but she felt small within it. Ethan appeared behind her, his presence calm but distant. "You will move into the East Wing tomorrow," he said. "A driver will take you to the library if you wish to continue your work. No one outside this house is to know the terms of our marriage." Clara nodded. "Understood. Dinner is at 7, he added, then paused. "You did well today." She turned, surprised by the faint warmth in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." "Ethan," he corrected quietly. Then he walked away. For days, their routine became mechanical. Breakfast in silence. Separate schedules. Polite exchanges that never crossed into emotion. The house was enormous, yet it felt smaller each time they passed in the hallways without a word. But things began to shift one evening when the electricity flickered during a storm. Clara was in the library room that Ethan rarely used. She was lighting a candle when he entered, jacket damp from the rain. "The backup generator will come on soon," he said, loosening his tie. "I am fine," she replied softly, shielding the flame with her hand. "Books do not mind the dark." He almost smiled. "You really love this place, do you not?" "It is the only thing that has never judged me," she said. For the first time, Ethan looked at her, not the dress, not the contract, but her. There was something steady and unafraid in her eyes that unsettled him. The thunder rolled outside, shaking the windows. She offered him the candle. "You look like you need the light more than I do." He took it, and for a moment their fingers touched. The contact was brief but strangely grounding, as if two worlds had met through a single spark. Later that night, Ethan found himself unable to sleep. He walked through the halls, his mind replaying her words. He had expected submission, compliance, silence. Instead, Clara carried quiet dignity, the kind that could not be bought. Downstairs, he noticed the same candle still burning on the table, a small golden flame fighting against the storm. Next to it lay her open notebook. Across the page, written in neat handwriting, were names of children, volunteers, and book donations she was planning to secure. Ethan closed the notebook gently. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, a trace of admiration, maybe even guilt. He whispered to the empty room, "Who are you really, Clara Hayes?" Outside, the rain eased. The storm was passing, but something far deeper was beginning inside the walls of the Brooks estate. Neither of them knew it yet, but the contract that brought them together was already starting to crumble in the face of something real. The next morning arrived calm and gray, the kind of sky that promised change but not yet rain. Clara woke early, her new life inside the Brooks estate still strange and silent. She walked through the marble corridors, carrying a small basket of books she planned to donate to a children's shelter downtown. The housekeepers greeted her politely, but their eyes followed her with quiet curiosity. She was, after all, the plain woman their billionaire employer had married without explanation. In the dining room, Ethan was already seated, reading the morning reports. The long table between them looked like a river of glass, cold and reflective. Clara poured herself a cup of coffee, careful not to disturb him. "You are up early," he said without looking up. "I am going to the library today," she replied. "We are sorting new donations." Ethan nodded. "The driver will take you. And, Clara," he paused, "there will be reporters outside soon. If they ask questions, say as little as possible." "I am used to being invisible," she said with a quiet smile. He glanced up for a second, surprised by her calmness, but said nothing more. Later that day, Clara stepped out of the car at the East Bridge Community Library, the same modest brick building she had been trying to save. The children there ran to her with bright eyes and mismatched shoes, calling her name. She laughed, kneeling down to greet them, her plain wedding band catching the sunlight. Inside, the library smelled of old paper and lemon polish. She met with Mrs. Turner, the elderly head librarian, who took her hands warmly. "You look different, dear," the woman said, studying her gently. "Maybe just tired," Clara answered, avoiding details. When she returned to the estate that evening, Ethan was on the phone in his office. His voice was clipped, commanding. "No, the merger will proceed as planned. Tell the board I do not mix business with personal matters." He hung up and noticed her standing at the door. "How was your day?" he asked. "Busy, but good. The library is still holding on." He leaned back, watching her. "You could ask me for help, you know. A single call from me could fund the place for a year." "I do not want charity," she said softly. "I want partnership. There is a difference." Her tone was steady, and it disarmed him. No one spoke to him that way without fear, without calculation. That night, during dinner, a new topic arose. Ethan's mother had invited several board members and their spouses for a private dinner to present the newlyweds. Clara felt the air grow heavy as he explained. "You do not need to impress them," Ethan said. "Just stay polite and quiet. They care more about appearances than conversation." Clara folded her napkin. "I will try not to disappoint them." The following evening, the dinner began under crystal chandeliers and the hum of classical music. Clara wore a simple navy dress chosen by the house stylist, yet she carried herself with quiet grace. When one of the guests, an older shareholder, asked condescendingly, "And what does Mrs. Brooks do all day in this big house?" Clara smiled. "I read," she said, "and I listen. You would be amazed how much truth hides between both." The table fell silent for a moment before laughter eased the tension. Even Ethan's stern mouth curved slightly at the edge. For the first time, he felt proud of her. But the evening turned when Victoria, his cousin, spoke from across the table. "I heard your marriage was arranged rather quickly," she said with a sweet but poisonous tone. "Some of us were surprised by the timing. It almost sounded strategic." Ethan's jaw tightened. Clara met Victoria's eyes calmly. "Sometimes strategy is another word for survival," she said. "I suppose we all do what we must to protect what we love." Her words disarmed the room. Even Victoria's smile faltered. After the dinner ended, Ethan followed Clara into the corridor. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "I did not do it for you," she replied. "I did it for your father. He believed in honor. I read about him." Ethan blinked. "You read about my father?" She nodded. "There was an old interview in the newspaper archive. He said, 'A business empire means nothing if you lose your soul building it.' I thought that was beautiful." He said nothing, but something shifted in his eyes, something human and unguarded. The days that followed grew subtly different. Ethan began joining her for morning coffee. Sometimes they spoke of books, sometimes of silence. Clara learned that he worked late, not out of ambition, but to fill the emptiness left by a father he could never please. Ethan learned that she lost her parents young and built her life on scholarships and second-hand dreams. One rainy afternoon, she found him sitting in the small library of the estate, staring at a framed photograph of his father. He looked tired. "I used to think money could protect me," he said. "That if I controlled everything, I would never be hurt again." "Did it work?" she asked. He turned to her with a faint smile. "Not really." She moved closer, her voice gentle. Maybe control is not what saves us. Maybe it is kindness. Ah. He looked at her then, really looked, and the silence between them deepened, no longer empty but alive. Outside, the storm had passed, but the air carried that strange stillness after thunder, the kind that comes before something begins. Neither of them knew it yet, but the boundaries of their agreement were starting to blur. In the great house that once echoed with loneliness, two strangers bound by duty were beginning to feel the dangerous pull of something far more powerful than a contract. It was not written on paper. It was something neither of them had planned for. It was the quiet beginning of love. Autumn arrived quietly at the Brooks estate. The gardens turned gold, and the air carried a hint of cold that made the mornings sharper. By now, Clara and Ethan had fallen into a rhythm that was no longer contractual but strangely domestic. She brought him tea when he worked late. He left her notes in the library, brief but thoughtful small gestures that neither of them dared to define. One afternoon, Ethan found Clara in the east garden, sitting under the maple tree with her sketchbook. She was drawing the children from the community library, their smiles captured in soft pencil strokes. He stood silently for a while before speaking. "You draw," he said. She looked up, startled but smiling. "It helps me remember why I started the library in the first place." He sat beside her on the stone bench, his suit contrasting her simple cardigan. "I used to draw," he said. "Blueprints of buildings I wanted to design before I joined the company. My father called it a waste of time." "What changed your mind?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "I learned that duty pays better than dreams." Clara closed her sketchbook and met his eyes. "Maybe duty builds walls. Dreams open doors." For a moment, he could not speak. Her words touched a place inside him he had long buried. That night, as they shared dinner by the long dining table, the silence between them felt softer. The candlelight made her eyes glow like amber. Ethan found himself watching the way she lifted her fork, the calm way she listened, the quiet strength she carried. When she looked up, he looked away quickly, as if caught doing something forbidden. Days later, the first major event of the Brooks Foundation, arrived the annual charity gala. It was one of the city's grandest nights, filled with journalists, investors, and social climbers. Ethan's mother insisted Clara attend as his wife. "The board will be there," she said. "It is time they see that you belong." Clara hesitated. "I do not fit their world." "You will," his mother assured her. On the evening of the gala, the mansion's ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold drapes. Clara entered quietly beside Ethan, wearing a silver gown that shimmered like morning frost. Conversations paused as eyes turned toward her. The same guests who once whispered about her ordinary looks now stared in silence. Ethan caught himself watching too, unable to look away. Something about her simplicity made every other person in the room fade into background noise. During the dinner, one of the investors mocked the community library project, calling it a sentimental waste. Clara responded calmly, her voice carrying through the table. "Education is never a waste. It is the only investment that outlives us." Applause followed soft at first, then stronger. Even the chairman of the board nodded in approval. Ethan felt a surge of pride that startled him. Later that evening, while guests mingled under the chandeliers, Ethan approached her by the terrace. "You surprised everyone tonight," he said. Clara smiled lightly. "Did I embarrass you?" "Quite the opposite," he said. "You reminded me what integrity looks like." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I did not come here to change you, Ethan. Maybe you already have," he said quietly. The music drifted through the night air. For the first time, Ethan reached for her hand, not as part of a contract, but as something human, uncertain, real. She hesitated, then let him hold it. The warmth lingered longer than it should have. From the shadows, Victoria watched them, her eyes cold and calculating. She lifted her phone and took a discreet picture. A faint smile crossed her lips. The perfect couple had just given her the perfect opportunity. Inside the ballroom, laughter and music filled the air. But outside on the terrace, the night grew heavy with something unspoken. Neither Ethan nor Clara saw the trap that was slowly being set. They only knew that for a brief, fragile moment, the world had felt simple, and that feeling was about to be tested. The next morning, headlines flooded the business columns. "Mystery wife of Ethan Brooks stuns at gala." "Who is the librarian who captured the millionaire's heart?" Photographs of Clara in her silver gown covered every screen. She had become a public fascination overnight. Ethan's mother called him before sunrise. "This attention will fade," she said briskly. "But keep your guard up. The board is watching." Ethan sighed, setting the phone down. He looked out at the city skyline, knowing that peace never lasted long in his world. Later that week, a board meeting filled the marble conference room. Clara attended quietly, seated at the far end. Investors praised the success of the gala, yet Victoria leaned forward, her tone sharp and sweet. "Since we are celebrating honesty, perhaps Mr. Brooks should explain why his marriage license and business contract share the same witness signature." The room fell silent. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What are you implying, Victoria?" She placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs pages from their private contract, leaked and printed. "I am implying," she said, "that this marriage was never real. It was a transaction. You have misled the board, and the company's reputation is now at risk." Gasps filled the room. Clara's face drained of color. Ethan stood abruptly, his voice like steel. "This meeting is over." But Victoria's voice cut through the tension. "Or perhaps it is only beginning." Within hours, the scandal spread online. Rumors claimed Clara had married for money, that she was a gold digger who tricked her way into luxury. Journalists waited outside the estate gates, shouting questions. Inside, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, the same veil from her wedding day folded beside her. Ethan entered quietly. "You should not believe what they say," he told her. She looked up at him, her eyes full of hurt. "You told me no one would ever know. You promised this would stay private." "I will fix it," he said firmly. "How?" she asked. "By denying the truth or by denying me?" He had no answer. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with everything they had never said. Clara rose, her voice trembling but steady. "You wanted a marriage that looked real but felt safe. Now you have neither." "Clara, please." She shook her head. "I came into this house with a deal. I am leaving with my dignity." She walked past him, down the long corridor lined with portraits of ancestors who had never known her name. The doors of the Brooks estate closed behind her with a sound that echoed like finality. Outside, flashes of cameras caught her figure as she stepped into the rain without an umbrella. But she did not hide her face. From his study window, Ethan watched her disappear into the storm. For the first time, he realized that the contract he had created to protect his empire had destroyed the only person who had ever treated him as more than one. The storm outside raged louder, mirroring the chaos inside his heart. The deal was over. The headlines were cruel. And yet, in the quietest corner of his mind, he knew this was not the end because something deeper than pride had already begun to take root. Days passed, but the house that once hummed with quiet routine now felt hollow. The scent of Clara's tea still lingered in the kitchen. Her books still sat neatly stacked by the window. Yet every trace of her presence only deepened Ethan's regret. Reporters camped outside the Brooks estate for a week, waiting for a statement. Ethan gave none. He ignored calls from his mother and refused interviews. Instead, he locked himself in his office, replaying every word Clara had said before she left. You wanted a marriage that looked real but felt safe. She had been right. One evening, he finally opened the folder that had started it all, the original marriage contract. His own signature glared back at him like a confession. 6 months, no affection, no publicity, no risk. It was the agreement of a man who feared love more than failure. He tore the first page slowly, then the next, until the papers were nothing but shreds scattered across the floor. At that same hour, Clara was back at the Eastbridge Library, sorting donated books under flickering lights. The media frenzy had reached her there too. Some parents had withdrawn their children, worried about bad influence. She carried the weight of their judgment quietly, but she refused to close the doors. Mrs. Turner placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You do not have to face this alone, dear. He may have made mistakes, but I saw how he looked at you that night at the gala. That was not a lie. Clara smiled faintly. Maybe not, but love built on a lie still breaks the same. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan's cousin Victoria enjoyed her small victory. The scandal had weakened Ethan's standing with the board, and she was already positioning herself to take his place. But one person on the board, Mr. Harlow, an old friend of Ethan's father, saw through the scheme. He visited Ethan at his office, finding him alone and exhausted. Your father once told me, Harlow said, that you had his eyes but not yet his courage. Do not let that woman destroy what is left of your name. Own the truth before it owns you. That night, Ethan made a decision. He called his attorney and requested a press conference for the next morning. When dawn came, he stood before dozens of reporters, the city skyline gleaming behind him. Flashbulbs exploded as he began to speak. "My name is Ethan Brooks," he said clearly. "And yes, the marriage between myself and Clara Hayes began as a legal arrangement. I will not deny it. But what began as duty became something far more real than I deserved." The room erupted with questions, but he continued. "Clara Hayes is not a gold digger. She is the reason our company's charity foundation exists today. She reminded me of the purpose my father built this empire for, to serve, not to control." A hush fell over the room. He ended with quiet conviction. "I will accept the consequences of my choices, but I will not allow her to carry the blame for my cowardice." That night, the headlines changed again. Ethan Brooks admits truth, defends wife in public. Public opinion shifted slowly, but the damage inside him remained. He had spoken the truth, yet the silence of his home felt heavier than ever. At the library, Clara read the news on her phone. For a long moment, she said nothing. The children were laughing nearby, stacking books into towers. She closed her eyes, feeling something loosen in her chest, not forgiveness yet, but something close to it. Outside, snow began to fall over the city, soft and soundless. Somewhere in the distance, Ethan stepped out of the building without his coat, his breath visible in the cold air. For the first time, he was not running from the storm. He was standing in it, ready to face what came next, even if it meant starting over from nothing but truth. Winter deepened, turning the city into a quiet maze of gray streets and pale skies. Ethan had not seen Clara since the press conference, but her absence was louder than any storm. Every corner of the Brooks estate reminded him of her voice, her calm defiance, her laughter that once filled the silence. At the company, tension grew. Victoria's manipulation had gone too far. The board was divided, investors uncertain. One afternoon, Ethan entered the meeting room, his expression calm but resolute. He had come prepared not to defend himself, but to expose the truth. He placed a stack of documents on the polished table. "These are financial records," he said steadily. "They show a pattern of unauthorized transfers from the company's charitable fund, all approved by Victoria Brooks." The room erupted in murmurs. Victoria's face went pale. "You are lying," she snapped. Ethan's voice was even. "The authorities will decide that. I am simply returning what you tried to take from the company, from our family, and from me." Security entered moments later, escorting her out as she shouted threats and accusations. When the doors closed, the silence felt final. Ethan did not feel victorious, only tired. He looked at Mr. Harlow, who gave a small nod of approval. The empire was safe, but his heart was still elsewhere. That evening, he drove through the falling snow toward the East Bridge Library. The windows glowed softly with yellow light. Inside, Clara was reading aloud to a circle of children, her voice gentle and steady. When she finished, she looked up and saw him standing at the doorway. The children waved goodbye as they left, leaving the two of them alone. Ethan stepped closer, snow melting from his coat. "You were right," he said quietly. "About everything. Duty built walls, and you were the only one brave enough to walk through them." Clara's eyes softened, but she did not speak. He took a slow breath. "I do not expect forgiveness. I only came to say thank you for saving more than just my company." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind outside. Then Clara said softly, "The library is open to everyone, Ethan, even those who are ready to start over." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I will come back tomorrow." Maybe you should," she said. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the city in quiet light. It was not reconciliation yet, but it was hope of fragile warmth in the coldest season. The next morning, sunlight finally broke through the winter clouds. Ethan arrived at the library early, carrying a single envelope in his hand. Clara was arranging books on the highest shelf when she saw him standing quietly at the doorway. "I brought something for you," he said. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Inside the envelope was a legal document bearing his signature and the seal of the Brooks Foundation. It was a donation contract, $1 million dedicated to the East Bridge Library, secured in her name. "I am not here to buy forgiveness," he said gently. "This is what the library deserves, what you deserve. It is no longer charity. It is the beginning of something built on truth." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she read the papers. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I spent years protecting a legacy that meant nothing," he said. You reminded me what a real legacy looks like. She looked up at him, eyes bright with emotion. You could have sent this through your lawyer. I could have, he said softly, but I wanted to see you read it. I wanted to be here when you realized that I mean every word. For a long moment, neither spoke. The quiet hum of the city outside filled the air between them. Then Clara placed the papers on the counter and reached into a drawer. She pulled out a small velvet box, the same one that had held her wedding ring. She opened it slowly. Inside lay the simple gold band she had taken off the night she left. She placed it on the counter between them. If we ever start again, she said, no contracts, no lies. Ethan nodded, his voice low. Only truth. The morning light fell across their faces, soft and golden, as if the world itself had paused to listen. It was not the end. It was the promise of something real, finally beginning. Spring came quietly to the city, washing away the gray of winter. The East Bridge Library had been restored, its walls painted fresh white, its shelves full again. Outside, the courtyard garden bloomed with tulips and daffodils. A new plaque stood near the entrance, engraved with the words, "The Clara Hayes Children's Library, a gift from the Brooks Foundation." The grand opening drew a small crowd of families, reporters, and children. Ethan stood beside Clara on the front steps, both of them dressed simply. The cameras flashed, but this time, neither of them hid. When the speeches ended, Ethan leaned toward her and whispered, "You once said books never judge. I think they forgive, too." Clara smiled softly. Only if the reader learns from the story. The ribbon was cut, and the doors opened to laughter and sunlight. Children rushed inside, their voices echoing like music. For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace, not the quiet of control, but the quiet of belonging. Later, as the crowd thinned, Clara turned to him. "You never told me why you kept my veil." He smiled, reaching into his coat pocket. The delicate piece of lace, once soaked by rain, was folded neatly. "Because it reminded me of the moment everything changed," he said. "When I stopped seeing an arrangement and started seeing you." Clara looked at him, eyes bright. "Then I suppose that was the real beginning." He took her hand, their fingers interlocking with ease. The world around them faded to a calm hush. Ethan whispered, "No more contracts, no more walls." She nodded. "Only love, and what we choose to build with it." The story closed not with thunder, but with light, the kind that comes after a long storm, when the truth finally feels like home.